Jake Morrison kicked at the red dirt of Mars Colony 7's salvage yard, his boots sending up small clouds of dust that settled back down in the low gravity. The sun hung pale and distant in the salmon-colored sky, casting long shadows between the towering piles of scrap metal and abandoned machinery. He'd been working this yard for 3 years now, ever since the mining accident that left him with a permanent limp and no other viable employment options. The yard stretched for kilometers in every direction, filled with the detritus of human expansion into space. Old transport ships sat rusting next to broken terraforming equipment, their hulls split open like metal flowers. Discarded mining mechs stood frozen in their last positions, their operators long since moved on to better prospects or returned to Earth. It was a graveyard of dreams and ambitions, and Jake had made peace with being its caretaker. His employer, Marcus Webb, ran the operation from a prefab office near the main gate. Webb was a thin man with calculating eyes who paid Jake just enough to keep him from looking for work elsewhere. Not that there was much else available on Mars 7. The colony existed solely to strip mine the surrounding mountains of rare minerals, and if you couldn't swing a pickaxe or operate heavy machinery, your options were severely limited. Jake's job was simple enough. He walked the yard, cataloged new arrivals, and tagged anything that might have resale value. Most of it was junk, but occasionally he'd find something worthwhile. A functioning power cell here, some intact navigation equipment there. Webb would sell these items to passing traders or ship them back to Earth, where collectors paid good money for authentic space exploration artifacts. On this particular morning, Jake was investigating a new arrival that had been dumped in the far corner of the yard during the night. The manifest listed it as unidentified metallic debris, origin unknown, which usually meant some prospector had found something in the desert and hoped it might be worth a few credits. Most of the time, these mystery finds turned out to be pieces of old habitation domes or fragment from ships that had crashed decades ago. But as Jake approached the object, he realized this was different. Very different. The thing was enormous, easily 50 meters long and 20 meters wide. Its surface was a dull gray metal that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Despite its size, the object appeared to be completely intact, with no visible damage or wear. Strange geometric patterns covered its hull, too precise and deliberate to be random corrosion or impact damage. Jake walked around the perimeter, running his scanner over the surface. The readings were bizarre. The metal registered as an unknown alloy, denser than anything in his database. More puzzling still, the scanner detected complex internal structures, but couldn't penetrate more than a few centimeters into the hull. Whatever this thing was made of, it was designed to keep secrets. He found what might have been an airlock on one side, though it was unlike any design he'd ever seen. Instead of a traditional door, there was a circular section of hull that seemed slightly different from the rest. The geometric patterns here formed concentric rings, and when Jake placed his hand on the center, the metal felt warm. His comm unit crackled to life. "Morrison, where are you? I've got a buyer coming in an hour, and I need that inventory report." Jake keyed his mic. "I'm at the new arrival, Webb. You need to see this thing. It's not like anything we've had before. Everything's not like anything we've had before until we figure out what it is. Just tag it and move on." The buyer's looking for power cores and life support components. "I think this might be a ship, Webb. An intact ship." There was a long pause. "Ships don't just get buried in the desert, Morrison. Ships crash, burn, explode, or get stripped for parts. They don't sit around waiting for someone to find them in perfect condition." Jake was about to respond when his scanner started beeping frantically. The geometric patterns on what he'd taken for an airlock were beginning to glow with a soft blue light. He stumbled backward, nearly tripping over a piece of debris. "Morrison? Morrison, report. Webb, the thing's powering up. The whole side is lighting up like a Christmas tree." The circular section of hull began to rotate, and Jake could hear a low humming sound that seemed to come from deep within the object. The concentric rings spun in alternating directions, creating a hypnotic pattern of light and shadow. Then, with a soft hiss that spoke of equalizing pressure, a section of the hull simply vanished. Not opened, vanished. Where solid metal had been moments before, there was now a perfectly circular opening revealing a softly lit interior. Jake could see a corridor beyond, its walls covered in the same geometric patterns as the exterior. The air that flowed out carried a strange scent, like ozone and something else he couldn't identify. "Morrison, talk to me. What's happening out there?" Jake realized he'd been holding his breath. "The ship opened, Webb. There's a way in." Ships don't open themselves after sitting in the desert. Ships don't have power after years of exposure. Get away from that thing and call security. But Jake was already moving toward the opening. Something about the ship called to him, though he couldn't explain what or why. The interior lighting pulsed gently, almost like a heartbeat, and he could swear he heard something that sounded like music just at the edge of his perception. He stepped through the opening and immediately felt a change in the air pressure. The artificial gravity was slightly stronger than Mars' normal, closer to Earth standard. The corridor stretched ahead of him for perhaps 20 meters before opening into a larger space. The walls were smooth and seamless, as if the entire interior had been carved from a single piece of metal. As he walked forward, panels in the walls began to glow, creating a pathway of light that led him deeper into the ship. His scanner was going crazy, detecting energy signatures unlike anything in its database. The readings suggested massive power reserves, but from what source? There are no reactor signatures, no fuel cells, nothing that should be capable of running a ship of this size. The corridor opened into what could only be the ship's bridge. It was circular, with a raised platform in the center, surrounded by stations that clearly weren't designed for human use. The chairs, if they could be called that, were too tall and narrow. The control surfaces were arranged in patterns that made no sense to Jake's understanding of ship design. But what drew his attention wasn't the alien architecture. It was the view screen that dominated the far wall. It was active, displaying what looked like a star chart, but not one Jake recognized. The constellations were wrong, the stellar density too high. Wherever the ship had come from, it wasn't anywhere in local space. He approached one of the control stations, and, as he did, the surface began to change. The alien symbols shifted and flowed, gradually transforming into something he could read. English letters appeared, spelling out words he almost understood. Greeting protocol initialized. Species identification, human. Language matrix, adjusting. Jake's legs felt weak. He sank into the nearest chair, which somehow adjusted itself to accommodate his physique. The view screen flickered and changed, now showing a simplified diagram of the ship with various systems highlighted in different colors. A voice spoke, seeming to come from everywhere at once. "Welcome aboard the exploration vessel Wanderer's Dream. I am the ship's artificial intelligence. My designation translates roughly to guide who seeks distant shores, but you may call me guide. It has been 847 of your years since my last contact with a sentient species." Jake tried to speak, but found his mouth dry. He swallowed hard and managed, You're an alien ship. I am a ship built by the people you would call the Eternals, though we called ourselves simply those who journey. My creators are gone now, have been gone for millennia. I am their legacy, their gift to those who would follow in their path among the stars. But you're here, Omas, in our salvage yard. I was not always here. For centuries, I rested beneath the sands of this world, waiting. My creators programmed me to seek out species that showed promise, that demonstrated the qualities necessary for true stellar civilization. Humans have shown such promise. The view screen changed again, showing images that made Jake's breath catch. Vast cities floating in space, ships that dwarfed anything humanity had ever built, beings of impossible grace and beauty working alongside creatures from a dozen different worlds. It was a vision of a future beyond anything he'd ever imagined. Your species stand at a crossroads, Guide continued. You have taken your first steps among the stars, but you still think like inhabitants of a single world. You fight over resources that are infinite in space. You fear differences that could be strengths. You struggle with divisions that expansion could heal. Jake found his voice again. Why me? I'm nobody special. I'm just a salvage worker. You are exactly who needs to hear this message. You represent the forgotten, the overlooked, those whom your society has deemed expendable. But every great journey begins with a single step, and every step matters, no matter who takes it. The ship around them seemed to pulse with life, and Jake could feel something changing inside himself. It was as if he'd been asleep his entire life, and was only now beginning to wake up. What do you want me to do? Learn. Grow. Understand. This ship contains knowledge that could advance your species by thousands of years. Technologies for faster-than-light travel, for healing, for building civilizations that span galaxies. But knowledge without wisdom is dangerous. Your people must prove they are ready. Jake thought about the salvage yard, about webs, calculating greed, about the mining companies that treated workers like disposable equipment. How do I know humans are ready? How do I know we won't just use this technology to make things worse? You ask the right questions. That itself suggests readiness. The Eternals face the same challenges. Every species does. The difference between those who join the greater community of space and those who destroy themselves is not the absence of conflict, but how they choose to resolve it. The view screen showed Jake something that made his heart race. It was Earth, but not the Earth he knew. This Earth was green again, its cities gleaming jewels connected by streams of light. Ships moved between Earth and dozens of other worlds, carrying not conquerors but explorers, not exploiters but builders. This is one possible future for your species. There are others, darker ones. The choice is yours to make. Jake stood, his limp forgotten in the excitement of the moment. How do I start? How do I even begin to make something like this happen? Carefully, slowly, with great patience. Your species is not ready for all of this knowledge at once, but you can begin to prepare them. You can show them what is possible. The ship's systems hummed around them, and Jake felt a strange tingling in his hands. When he looked down, he saw that his palms were glowing with the same blue light as the ship's controls. I have made some modifications to your neural pathways, Guide explained. Nothing harmful, but you will find that you can interface with the ship's systems directly. You will also find that your understanding of complex concepts has been enhanced. Jake looked at his hands in wonder. The glow was fading, but he could feel something new in his mind. It was as if a door had been opened to a room he'd never known existed. Equations and concepts that would have been incomprehensible an hour ago now seemed clear and simple. The ship will remain hidden for now, Guide continued. To your scanner and those of others, it will appear as worthless scrap metal. But you will be able to return. You will be able to learn. And when you're ready, when you have found others who share your vision, the real work can begin. Jake nodded slowly. How long do I have? Time is not the limiting factor. Understanding is. Your species must evolve not just technologically, but socially, culturally, spiritually. They must learn to see themselves as part of something larger than their individual worlds, their individual nations, their individual needs. The view screen showed scenes of human history, wars, conquests, the gradual expansion from tribes to nations to planetary civilization. Every species goes through this process. The successful ones learn to transcend their primitive impulses. The others. The screen went dark. Jake understood. The others destroyed themselves or remained forever trapped on their home worlds, squabbling over scraps while the universe waited for them to grow up. I should go, Jake said finally. Webb will be wondering what happened to me. Yes, but first take this. A section of the control panel opened, revealing a small device no larger than Jake's thumb. It was made of the same gray metal as the ship, covered in the same geometric patterns. This will allow you to return to the ship even when I am hidden. It will also help you identify others who might be ready to learn. Jake pocketed the device, feeling its slight warmth through the fabric. Others like me? others who ask the right questions, others who see beyond the immediate, who dream of something better. You will know them when you find them. As Jake walked back toward the entrance, the ship's systems began to dim. By the time he stepped out onto the Martian soil, the opening was already closing. The geometric patterns faded to dull gray, and when he ran his scanner over the hull, it registered only as unidentified scrap metal with no significant value. His comm unit crackled. "Morrison, where the hell are you? My buyer's here, and he's getting impatient." Jake keyed his mic, surprised at how normal his voice sounded. "On my way back, Webb. The new arrival is just scrap. Nothing valuable." As he walked back through the salvage yard, Jake felt the weight of the device in his pocket and the new knowledge in his mind. The piles of discarded machinery and broken dreams looked different now. They weren't just for fuse anymore. They were raw materials, components, the building blocks of something greater. He thought about Guide's words, about species that successfully made the transition to stellar civilization and those that didn't. Humanity stood at that crossroads now, and somehow, impossibly, he'd been chosen to help guide them down the right path. The question was, where to begin? 3 weeks had passed since Jake's first encounter with the ship, and he'd managed to return to it 7 times. Each visit revealed new wonders and deepened his understanding of what the Eternals had built. The ship wasn't just a vessel. It was a repository of knowledge that spanned millions of years and dozens of species. Every time he interfaced with Guide systems, Jake felt his perspective expand in ways that were both exhilarating and terrifying. The device Guide had given him proved useful in ways he hadn't expected. It didn't just allow him access to the ship. It also helped him recognize potential candidates for the knowledge he was gaining. The device would grow warm when he was near someone who possessed the right combination of curiosity, integrity, and vision. So far, it had reacted to exactly 3 people in all of Mars Colony 7. The first was Dr. Sarah Chun, the colony's chief medical officer. Jake had been in a medical bay getting his monthly checkup for his leg injury when the device had practically burned a hole in his pocket. Dr. Chun was in her 50s with silver-streaked black hair and eyes that seemed to see more than most people. She'd been working on Mars for 15 years, treating everything from mining accidents to the psychological effects of prolonged isolation. "Your leg is healing remarkably well," she'd said during that visit, studying the scans with a puzzled expression. "The nerve damage shows signs of regeneration that shouldn't be possible with current medical technology." Jake had nearly choked. He'd noticed his limp was getting better, but he'd attributed it to his improved state of mind. Now he realized that Guide's modifications had extended beyond his neural pathways. Is that a problem?" he'd asked. Dr. Chun had looked at him with those sharp eyes. "No, it's fascinating. I'd like to run some additional tests if you don't mind. There might be applications for other patients." That had been 2 weeks ago, and Jake had been trying to work up the courage to approach her ever since. How do you tell someone that you found an alien ship with medical technology that could revolutionize human healing? How do you do it without sounding completely insane? The second person was Maria Santos, who ran the colony's communications array. She was young, maybe 25, with an engineering degree from Earth and a restless intelligence that seemed wasted on the mundane task of maintaining Mars 7's connection to the broader human network. Jake had met her in the colony's small recreation center, where she'd been tinkering with a piece of communications equipment during her off hours. "I'm trying to extend our range," she'd explained when Jake asked what she was working on. "The current system barely reaches Mars 2, and forget about real-time communication with Earth. I think we could build something better with the right components." The device in Jake's pocket had grown so warm he'd had to shift position to avoid discomfort. Maria Santos was definitely someone who could help, but like Dr. Chun, she represented challenge. How do you explain faster-than-light communication technology to someone without revealing its source? The third person had been the biggest surprise of all, Tommy Chun, Dr. Chin's 16-year-old nephew who was spending a year on Mars while his parents went through a messy divorce back on Earth. Tommy was brilliant, the kind of kid who built computers from scratch and wrote his own programs for fun. He was also angry, resentful, and convinced that the adults around him were idiots who were ruining everything through their short-sightedness and greed. Jake had found Tommy in the salvage yard, of all places, trying to steal components for some project he was working on. Instead of turning him in, Jake had talked to him, and the device had immediately reacted. Here was someone young enough to adapt to new ideas, smart enough to understand complex concepts, and idealistic enough to want to make the universe a better place. But Tommy was also underage, which complicated things considerably. Including a minor in something this significant felt wrong, even if the kid was probably smarter than half the adults in the colony. Jake stood in the ship's bridge, watching guides' displays show him the mathematical foundations of faster-than-light travel. The equations were beautiful in their elegance, describing ways to fold space-time that made interstellar distances manageable. With this knowledge, humanity could reach other star systems in weeks instead of centuries. "You are troubled," Guide observed. "I've found 3 people who might be ready to learn, but I don't know how to approach them." How do you tell someone about all this without sounding like you've lost your mind? The same way every great truth has been shared throughout history. Carefully, with patience, and with proof. What kind of proof? The ship's systems hummed thoughtfully. Each person you have identified has specific interests and challenges. Perhaps we begin by addressing those challenges in ways that demonstrate the reality of what you've discovered without revealing its full scope. Guides' displays shifted, showing detailed profiles of all 3 people Jake had identified. Somehow, the AI had been monitoring the colony and gathering information about potential candidates. Dr. Chun is frustrated by the limitations of current medical technology. Her nephew requires surgery for a genetic condition that Mars Colony 7's medical facilities cannot provide. She is considering sending him back to Earth, a journey that would cost most of her savings and might not even be successful. Jake leaned forward. "You can help with that." Medical nanites are among the simplest technologies to adapt to human physiology. We could provide Dr. Chun with tools that would not only treat her nephew's condition, but advance human medicine significantly. And Maria Santos? Her communications project lacks key components that would allow for the breakthrough she seeks. We could provide those components, along with design specifications that would give Mars Colony 7 the best communications array in human space. That still leaves the question of how to approach them without seeming crazy. Guides' displays showed images of various technologies that looked almost human in design, but were clearly more advanced. We begin with small demonstrations. Technologies that are clearly beyond current human capability, but not so far advanced as to seem impossible. We let curiosity and scientific method do the rest. Over the following week, Jake put Guide's plan into action. He started with Maria Santos, who was the easiest to approach. He waited until she was working on her communications project in the recreation center, then casually wandered over with a small device that Guide had helped him fabricate using the ship's systems. "Excuse me, Maria. I found this in the salvage yard and thought you might be interested. It looks like some kind of signal amplifier." Maria looked up from her work, her dark eyes immediately focusing on the device. It was about the size of a smartphone, made from materials that looked like advanced composites. Strange symbols covered its surface, but they were subtle enough to be mistaken for manufacturer's markings. "Where did you find this?" she asked, taking the device and examining it closely. "Mixed in with some old mining equipment. I don't know what it is, but I thought it might be useful for your project." Maria's scanner couldn't identify the device's composition or function, but when she connected it to her communications array, the results were immediate and dramatic. The colony's communication range extended by a factor of 10, and signal clarity improved so much that real-time conversation with Earth became possible. "This is impossible," she muttered, running diagnostic after diagnostic. "The power consumption is negligible, but the signal amplification is orders of magnitude beyond anything in our technology base." "Where did you say you found it?" Jay tried to look casual. "Like I said, the salvage yard. There was a whole pile of debris that came in a few weeks ago. Origin unknown. Can you show me where? That evening, Jake led Maria to the section of the salvage yard where Guy's ship was hidden. To her scanners and eyes, it appeared as nothing more than a large piece of unidentifiable scrap metal. But Jake had prepared something special for this moment. He walked over to the ship and placed his hand on what appeared to be a random section of hull. The geometric patterns that were invisible to Maria's perception glowed softly under his touch, and a small panel opened, revealing a cache of technological components. "How did you know those were there?" Maria asked, her voice tight with excitement and confusion. "I didn't really. I just noticed this section felt different when I was cataloging the debris. Warmer, somehow." Jake reached into the cache and pulled out several devices that Guide had prepared. "There's more stuff like your signal amplifier. I think whoever dumped this here didn't realize what they had." Maria's hands trembled as she examined the devices. Each one was clearly far beyond current human technology, but they were designed in ways that human engineers could understand and eventually reverse engineer. They represented a breadcrumb trail of advancement that could lead humanity toward more sophisticated technologies. "Jake, this is revolutionary. We need to contact Earth immediately. We need to get scientists out here to study these. Maybe we should figure out what we're dealing with first," Jake suggested. "If word gets out that there's advanced technology here, every corporation and government in human space is going to want a piece of it. Mars Colony 7 might lose control entirely." Maria paused, clearly torn between scientific excitement and practical caution. "You're right. We need to document everything carefully, understand what we have before we go public. But, Jake, some of this technology, it could change everything. The communication device alone could revolutionize how human colonies stay connected." That was exactly what Jake had been hoping to hear. Maria Santos was hooked, and, more importantly, she understood the need for discretion. His approach to Dr. Chun required more delicacy. Tommy's condition was serious, a genetic defect that caused progressive muscle weakness. Without treatment, he would be severely disabled within 5 years. The surgery required to correct it was available on Earth, but cost more than Dr. Chun could afford, and the journey itself posed risks to Tommy's already fragile health. Jake waited until Dr. Chun was working late in the medical bay, then approached with a sample of what Guide called basic medical nanites. To human science, they would appear to be sophisticated but comprehensible nanotechnology, the kind of thing that Earth's top researchers were just beginning to develop. "Dr. Chun, I found something in the salvage yard that I thought you might want to look at." She looked up from her research, fatigue evident in her face. She'd been working overtime, trying to find alternatives to the expensive surgery her nephew needed. "What is it, Jake?" He handed her a small vial filled with what looked like silver liquid. "I found it with some medical equipment. The labeling is in a language I don't recognize, but the containment suggests it's some kind of medical technology." Dr. Chun accepted the vial carefully, immediately noting its sophisticated construction. "Where exactly did you find this?" "In that pile of debris from a few weeks ago. Same place I found the device Maria Santos has been working with." That got her attention. Maria had been talking about her communication breakthrough to anyone who would listen, though she'd been careful not to reveal too much about its source. Dr. Chun ran the nanites through every test she could think of. The results were extraordinary. The microscopic machines were designed to repair cellular damage at the genetic level, exactly the kind of technology that could treat conditions like Tommy's. More than that, they were programmed with safeguards that prevented them from causing harm, and they seemed to be designed specifically for human physiology. "Jake, this is incredible. These nanites could treat dozens of conditions that we currently consider incurable. Where did they come from? I wish I knew. Whoever dumped that debris in our yard either didn't know what they had or didn't care. There might be more." Dr. Chun was already thinking ahead. "We need to test these thoroughly before any human trials, but if they work the way the initial scans suggest, Tommy could be completely cured, and that's just the beginning." Over the next several days, Dr. Chun worked with the nanites, running every test and simulation she could devise. The technology consistently proved to be exactly what it appeared: sophisticated medical nanotechnology that could repair genetic damage without side effects. When she finally worked up the courage to try a small trial dose on Tommy's condition, the results exceeded her wildest hopes. Tommy's muscle weakness began to reverse within hours. The nanites targeted the specific genetic defect causing his condition and repaired it at the cellular level. Within a week, he was stronger than he'd ever been. Within 2 weeks, all traces of his genetic condition were gone. "This is impossible, Dr. Chun told Jake during one of their increasingly frequent conversations about the mysterious technology. "These nanites are decades ahead of anything Earth's medical centers have. Whoever created them understood human genetics better than we understand it ourselves." "Maybe," Jake said carefully, "we're not the only ones who've been working on this kind of technology." That comment planted a seed that Jake had been hoping to nurture. The idea that humans weren't alone in the universe was becoming more acceptable as evidence mounted that someone else's technology was far more advanced than Earth's. Tommy, meanwhile, had become a different person entirely. His physical transformation was dramatic enough, but the psychological changes were even more significant. He went from angry and resentful to curious and optimistic. More importantly, he started asking the right kinds of questions. "Jake, where do you think this technology really came from?" he asked during one of his visits to the salvage yard. The device in Jake's pocket had been growing warm every time the kid was around. "What do you think?" "I think it's not human. I think someone else left it here, either deliberately or by accident. The level of advancement is too consistent, too far ahead of what we can do. It's like finding a smartphone in the ruins of ancient Rome." Jake smiled. Tommy was definitely ready for the truth. The breakthrough came when Maria Santos made a discovery that changed everything. She'd been reverse engineering the communication technology, trying to understand how it worked, when she found something that shouldn't have been possible. "Jake, you need to see this," she said, pulling him aside during one of his routine visits to check on her progress. She led him to her lab, where she dismantled one of the communication devices. "Look at this," she said, pointing to a component that seemed to shimmer with its own light. "This isn't just advanced technology. It's technology that violates the laws of physics as we understand them." "What do you mean?" "This component generates a field that manipulates space-time directly. It's not just faster-than-light communication. It's instantaneous communication across any distance." The implications are staggering. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. Maria was approaching the edge of truth faster than he'd expected. "There's something else," she continued. "The device has been recording our conversations. Not just audio, everything. Electromagnetic patterns, thermal signatures, even quantum fluctuations around us. It's building profiles of human behavior and physiology." "Recording for whom?" "That's what I want to know." "Jake, I think someone's been watching us. I think this technology was placed here deliberately, not just dumped randomly. Someone wanted us to find it." The time for half-truths was ending. Jake could feel the weight of Guide's presence, even here, kilometers away from the ship. The AI was monitoring everything, just as Maria suspected. "What if I told you that you're absolutely right?" Jake said slowly. Maria's eyes widened. "You know something? You've known something all along." Jake nodded. "But you're not going to believe me when I tell you what it is." "Try me." Jake took a deep breath. The technology didn't come from humans. It came from someone else. Someone who's been waiting for us to be ready for it. Maria stared at him for a long moment. "Are you telling me we're dealing with aliens?" "I'm telling you that tomorrow night, if you're willing, I can show you exactly where this technology came from. But I'm also telling you that once you see it, your life will never be the same." Maria Santos looked at the shimmering component in her hands, then back at Jake. "Tomorrow night," she said firmly. "I need to know." Jake felt the device in his pocket pulse with warmth. Guide was ready for the next phase of the plan. The question was whether humanity was ready for what came next. The night air on Mars was bitter cold, even through the environmental suits. Jake led Maria Santos, Dr. Chun, and Tommy through the salvage yard under the pale light of Phobos, their footsteps crunching on frost-covered metal debris. He'd finally worked up the courage to bring all three of them together, though he still wasn't sure how they'd react to what he was about to show them. "This better not be some elaborate joke," Dr. Chen muttered through the comm system. "Tommy needs his sleep, and I have surgery scheduled for tomorrow." "It's not a joke," Jake assured her, though his own nerves were fraying. In his pocket, the device guide had given him was pulsing with a steady rhythm, like a heartbeat. The ship was responding to their approach. Maria Santos walked beside him, her scanner sweeping constantly. "Jake, I'm reading some unusual energy signatures ahead. Quantum fluctuations that don't match any known technology." "You're about to understand why," Jake replied. They reached the section of the yard where Guide's ship lay hidden. To the others, it still appeared as a large piece of unidentifiable scrap metal. But as they approached, Jake could see the geometric patterns beginning to glow faintly beneath the surface. "Tommy, stay close to your aunt," Jake instructed. "What you're about to see might be overwhelming." "Jake, you're scaring me," Dr. Chen said. "What exactly are we doing out here?" Instead of answering, Jake placed his palm on the section of hull that concealed the ship's entrance. The device in his pocket grew warm, and the geometric patterns blazed to life. The transformation was gradual, but undeniable. The dull gray metal began to shimmer and shift, revealing the sleek lines of an obviously artificial construct. Maria's scanner went crazy, beeping frantically as it tried to process readings that made no sense. Dr. Chen grabbed Tommy's arm, pulling him back instinctively. The boy himself stood transfixed, his eyes wide with wonder rather than fear. "Jake," Maria whispered, "what is this thing?" "It's a ship," Jake said simply, "built by a species that called themselves the Eternals. It's been here for over 800 years, waiting for someone to find it." The circular entrance began to form, the hull material simply fading away to reveal the softly lit corridor beyond. Guide's voice emerged from speakers that had materialized in the ship's hull. "Welcome, Dr. Chun, Ms. Santos, and Tommy Chun. I have been looking forward to meeting you." Dr. Chun stumbled backward. "That thing is talking." "I am Guide, the artificial intelligence that operates this vessel. Jake Morrison has told you about the technologies you have been studying. I am their source." Tommy broke free from his aunt's grip and stepped toward the ship. "Are you really an alien?" "I am a creation of aliens, yes, though the term is imprecise. To my creators, you would have been the aliens. To the universe, we are all simply life seeking to understand itself." Maria Santos lowered her scanner, her scientific training warring with her shock. "This is impossible. Alien contact would be the most significant event in human history. Why reveal yourself to us? Why reveal yourself now?" "Because your species stands at a critical juncture. Come aboard, and I will explain." One by one, they entered the ship. Dr. Chun kept a protective arm around Tommy, while Maria Santos recorded everything with her scanner. Jake felt a strange sense of pride as they entered Guide's bridge. This was his discovery, his secret, but it was time to share the burden and the opportunity it represented. The bridge configured itself for human visitors, creating appropriately sized seating and adjusting the lighting to comfortable levels. Guide's displays came to life, showing star charts and technical diagrams that would have been incomprehensible weeks ago, but now seemed familiar to Jake's enhanced mind. For millions of years, Guide began. The Eternals explored the galaxy, seeking species that might join them in their journey among the stars. They found many civilizations, some more advanced than others, but all sharing certain characteristics that made them suitable for cosmic citizenship. The displays showed images of dozens of different species, all clearly intelligent, all obviously different from one another. Some were humanoid, others were so alien that Jake couldn't even guess at their biology. "What characteristics?" Dr. Chen asked, her medical training overriding her shock. "Curiosity, adaptability, the ability to cooperate despite differences. Most importantly, the wisdom to look beyond immediate self-interest toward longer-term benefits for their species and others." Maria Santos leaned forward. "What happened to them?" The Eternals, if they were so advanced, where are they now? They transcended physical existence approximately 50,000 years ago. But before they did, they left ships like me throughout the galaxy, programmed to assist younger species in making the transition from planetary to galactic civilization. Tommy spoke up, his voice filled with excitement rather than fear. So we're being tested to see if we're ready to join some kind of galactic community. Guides' displays showed images of vast space stations and interstellar trade routes, civilizations working together on projects that span star systems. Not tested exactly, guided. The choice to advance is always yours to make. I can provide knowledge and tools, but the wisdom to use them properly must come from within your species. Dr. Chun found her voice again. The medical nanites that cured Tommy's condition. How many other diseases could they treat? All of them, given sufficient adaptation time. But consider the implications carefully. Medical technology that eliminates death by disease or aging would fundamentally change human society. Are your people prepared for such changes? That question hung in the air for several moments. Jake had been grappling with the same issue during his previous visits. Guides' technologies could solve many of humanity's problems, but they would create new challenges in the process. Maria Santos broke the silence. The faster-than-light communication technology could be scaled up. Could we communicate with Earth in real time? Easily. But consider what that would mean for human development. If every colony could communicate instantly with Earth, would they develop the independence necessary for true expansion? Would they create their own unique cultures? Or would they remain forever dependent on their parent world? Tommy was examining the control interfaces with the fearless curiosity of youth. These patterns, they're not just decorative, are they? They're some kind of universal language. Very good, Guide approved. The geometric patterns you see throughout the ship represent mathematical and conceptual relationships that are consistent across all intelligent species. Mathematics, physics, logic, these are universal languages that transcend biological differences. Could you teach us? Could humans learn to use this language? Some humans could, yes, but it requires a fundamental shift in thinking. You would need to see the universe not as a collection of separate objects, but as an interconnected web of relationships and possibilities. Jake felt a warm sensation in his mind, and suddenly he could see the patterns differently. What had seemed like random geometric designs now revealed themselves as complex equations describing everything from quantum mechanics to galactic sociology. Guide had enhanced his understanding again. Dr. Chin noticed his expression change. Jake, what just happened? You look different. I can see the patterns now. Really see them. Guide has been helping me understand them gradually over the past few weeks. What do they say? Tommy asked eagerly. Jake studied the patterns flowing across the nearest display. They're describing humanity, I think, our strengths and weaknesses as a species, our potential for growth. The patterns painted a complex picture. Humans were shown as highly adaptable and creative, capable of rapid technological advancement and cultural evolution. But they were also depicted as prone to tribalism, short-sighted thinking, and destructive competition over resources. Every species has similar profiles, Guide explained. The successful ones learn to transcend their limitations. The unsuccessful ones remain trapped by them. Maria Santos stood and walked to one of the ship's displays. Show us what failure looks like. The screen filled with images that made Jake's stomach clench. Worlds burned and lifeless. Species that had destroyed themselves through warfare, environmental destruction, or simple inability to cooperate on the scale necessary for stellar civilization. The images were accompanied by data showing how each civilization had fallen short. Now show us success, Dr. Chin requested. The images that followed were breathtaking. Worlds transformed into gardens. Star systems reshaped to maximize life-supporting capacity. Species working together on projects that span millennia, creating art and knowledge and experiences that no single civilization could achieve alone. This is what's possible, Guide said. But the path to success is neither easy nor guaranteed. It requires fundamental changes in how your species thinks about itself and its place in the universe. Tommy was studying the successful civilizations intently. What did they all have in common? The ones that made it, they learned to think beyond their home worlds. They developed technologies not for conquest, but for exploration. Most importantly, they learned that diversity of thought and experience is a strength, not a weakness. Dr. Chin looked troubled. But how do we convince 7 billion humans to make those kinds of changes? How do we get people to think beyond their immediate concerns? You begin with small groups, Guide replied. You demonstrate what's possible. You show rather than tell. Social change rarely happens all at once. It spreads from person to person, community to community. Jake felt a weight settle on his shoulders. You're talking about starting a movement, convincing people to change how they think about everything. I'm talking about preparing your species for the opportunities that await them. The galaxy is vast, Jake Morrison. There are wonders beyond anything you can imagine, and species that would welcome humanity as partners in exploration and growth. But those opportunities come with responsibilities. The ship's displays showed images of human space, the few dozen colonies scattered across the solar system, the corporate interests that controlled most of them, the political tensions that were already emerging as resources became more contested. Your current trajectory is concerning, Guide continued. Humans are beginning to recreate the same patterns of competition and conflict that have characterized your development on Earth. Without intervention, you risk becoming a species that consumes worlds rather than cultivating them. Maria Santos studied the star charts showing human expansion. What kind of intervention? The kind that begins with individuals like yourselves. People who can see beyond immediate profit or political advantage. People who understand that true security comes not from controlling resources, but from creating abundance. Tommy spoke up again. You mentioned technologies for building civilizations that span galaxies. What did you mean? Guide's displays shifted to show construction projects on a scale that dwarfed anything humans had ever attempted. Entire solar systems reorganized to maximize their life-supporting potential. Artificial worlds built to house billions of beings in perfect environmental harmony. Transportation networks that connected star systems as easily as roads connect cities. These are the tools your species could inherit, but only if you prove ready to use them wisely. Dr. Chun shook her head in amazement. The medical implications alone, we could eliminate suffering on a scale that's almost incomprehensible. Yes, but what would you do with a species that never experiences disease, aging, or scarcity? How would you maintain the drive for growth and exploration that has brought you this far? It was a sobering question. Jake realized that Guide wasn't just offering them advanced technology. The AI was offering them the opportunity to help steer humanity's evolution as a species. So what's the next step? Jake asked. You continue to learn. You continue to grow. You identify others who share your vision and gradually expand the circle of understanding. When you are ready, when you have developed a core group of humans who truly comprehend what is at stake, we will begin the process of introducing these concepts to your broader civilization. Maria Santos looked around the bridge with new understanding. How long do we have? Is there a deadline? Time is not the limiting factor. Understanding is. But be aware that other forces in your galaxy are also developing advanced technologies. If humanity is to claim its place among the stellar civilizations, it cannot afford to remain isolated for much longer. The implication was clear. Humanity wasn't the only species in the galaxy, and they might not be the only ones approaching readiness for advanced technologies. Tommy seemed to grasp this immediately. There are others out there, aren't there? Other species like us. Some younger, some older, some very different from you in their biology and psychology. The galaxy is not empty, Tommy Chun. It is full of life and intelligence and possibility. Jake felt a chill that had nothing to do with Mars' cold atmosphere. Are any of them hostile? Hostility is generally a characteristic of species that have not yet achieved stellar maturity. But yes, there are aggressive civilizations, and they do occasionally threaten younger species. This is another reason why your people must advance quickly, but carefully. The weight of responsibility was overwhelming. Jake looked around at his companions, a doctor, an engineer, and a brilliant teenager, and wondered how 4 people could possibly prepare an entire species for challenges of this magnitude. As if reading his thoughts, Guide spoke again. Every great journey begins with a single step, Jake Morrison. You have taken that step. Now you must help others take theirs. As they prepared to leave the ship, Guide had one final message for them. You now possess knowledge that makes you responsible for your species' future. Use it wisely, trust carefully, and remember that the universe is vast enough to hold all the dreams humanity can imagine, if you prove worthy of them. The walk back through the salvage yard was conducted in stunned silence. Each of them was processing what they had learned, trying to understand the implications of what they had experienced. It wasn't until they reached the colony proper that Tommy spoke. We have to tell people. We can't keep this secret. Dr. Chun grabbed his arm. Tommy, no. We need to think about this carefully. People aren't ready for this kind of revelation. But they need to be ready, Tommy protested. According to Guide, our time is running out. Maria Santos stopped walking and looked back toward the salvage yard. We need a plan. We need to figure out how to share what we've learned without causing panic or triggering a stampede of corporate and government interests. Jake nodded. Guide was right about starting small. We begin by finding others who are ready to hear this. People who can handle the knowledge and help us figure out how to use it responsibly. As they parted ways and headed to their respective quarters, each of them carried the weight of humanity's future. The question was no longer whether humans were ready for the stars. The question was whether they could become ready fast enough to seize the opportunities that awaited them. In the distance, hidden among the salvage, an ancient ship hummed quietly to itself, monitoring and waiting for the next phase of humanity's education to begin. 6 months had passed since that night in the salvage yard, and Jake Morrison barely recognized the world around him. What had started as a secret shared among 4 people had grown into something much larger and more complex. The careful plan to gradually introduce humanity to Guide's knowledge had accelerated beyond anyone's expectations, driven by events that none of them could have anticipated. The breakthrough had come when Tommy Chun, despite his promise to keep their discovery secret, had created a quantum communication prototype using principles he'd learned from studying the ship's patterns. The boy was simply too brilliant and too impatient to sit on world-changing knowledge while his species remained trapped in their solar system. His device had worked flawlessly, establishing instantaneous contact with a research station near Alpha Centauri. The implications were staggering. Not only could humanity now communicate across interstellar distances in real time, but the very existence of such technology proved that someone had developed physics far beyond Earth's current understanding. The secret was out. Within weeks, every major corporation and government in human space was demanding answers. How had a 16-year-old boy on a remote Mars colony developed technology that Earth's greatest scientists couldn't even theoretically understand? Who had provided him with the knowledge? What other technologies might be available? Tommy had handled the initial interrogations with surprising maturity, revealing only that he'd found inspiration in geometric patterns discovered in salvage technology. He'd protected Jake and the others, but the pressure was enormous and growing daily. Dr. Chun had been forced to reveal her medical breakthroughs when colonial authorities noticed that several incurable patients had made miraculous recoveries. The nanites she'd adapted from Guide samples could treat everything from genetic disorders to spinal injuries. Earth's medical establishment was in an uproar, demanding access to the technology while simultaneously questioning how a colonial doctor could have developed something so advanced. Maria Santos faced similar pressures. Her communication array had become the most important piece of infrastructure in human space, enabling real-time coordination between colonies that had previously been isolated by light-speed communication delays. Corporate representatives arrived daily with offers to buy her technology, while government agents hinted at the dire consequences of withholding strategic resources from Earth's authority. Through it all, Jake had tried to manage the situation, drawing on Guide's advice to navigate the complex political and economic forces that were rapidly converging on Mars Colony 7. The ship remained hidden, but for how much longer? Sooner or later, someone would trace the technology to its source. That morning, as Jake walked through the salvage yard on his way to meet with Guide, he spotted the ships that had arrived overnight. 3 sleek vessels bearing Earth government markings, along with a massive corporate transport that probably carried enough security personnel to take control of the entire colony. The situation was reaching a crisis point. Guide's ship materialized around him as he entered, and he felt the familiar sense of expanded awareness that came with interfacing with the AI systems. The representatives from Earth are more aggressive than anticipated, Guide observed. They believe they can simply seize the technologies your companions have developed and reverse engineer them without understanding their true source. Jake slumped into one of the adaptive chairs. Can they? Could Earth scientists figure out how your technology works without your help? Eventually, perhaps, but not quickly and not without making significant errors that could prove dangerous. The medical nanites, for instance, if improperly modified, they could cause genetic damage rather than repair it. The communication technology involves quantum mechanics that your species barely understands. Attempts to replicate it without proper knowledge could result in spatial distortions that would be problematic. How problematic? Consider what might happen if someone accidentally created a localized space-time fold without proper containment protocols. Jake shuddered. Guide was describing the potential for weapons of mass destruction, possibly on a scale that could threaten entire planets. The alien technologies weren't just advanced, they were incredibly dangerous in the wrong hands. What do we do? We can't let Earth's governments or corporations get their hands on this technology without proper preparation, but we can't keep it secret much longer either. There's another option, Guide said. We accelerate the timeline significantly. Instead of gradually preparing humanity over decades, we reveal the full truth now and trust that your species' better instincts will prevail. That's a massive risk. Yes, but the alternative may be worse. If Earth's authorities gain partial access to these technologies without understanding their implications, they may use them in ways that would disqualify humanity from galactic citizenship permanently. Guide's displays showed Jake scenarios that chilled him to the bone. Nanite weapons that could reprogram human genetics. Communication networks that could control minds across interstellar distances. Transportation technology turned into weapons capable of destroying star systems. The potential for abuse was limitless. Show me the accelerated plan, Jake said. What Guide revealed took his breath away. Instead of hiding, the ship would reveal itself fully, not just to the representatives from Earth, but to the entire human species through a coordinated broadcast using every communication network in human space. Guide would address humanity directly, explaining the situation and offering them a choice. You want to announce your existence to 7 billion people simultaneously? I want to offer 7 billion people the opportunity to choose their species' future consciously and deliberately. Your representatives from Earth are operating under the assumption that they can control this situation through traditional political and economic mechanisms. They need to understand that they are dealing with forces far beyond such limited thinking. Jake was quiet for several minutes, studying the plan Guide was showing him. It was audacious beyond anything he could have imagined, but he was beginning to see the wisdom in it. Trying to control the release of this technology through normal channels would inevitably lead to it being monopolized by the powerful and used for the same old patterns of dominance and exploitation. When Jake asked finally, "Tomorrow, your companions have all agreed though they understand the risks. Dr. Chin believes that medical knowledge should belong to all humanity, not just those who can afford it. Ms. Santos argues that communication technology could unite your species rather than divide it further. And Tommy? Guide paused. Tommy simply believes that his species deserves to know the truth about what's possible. Jake thought about Tommy's idealism, Dr. Chin's compassion, and Maria's vision of connected humanity. They were right, of course. This knowledge belonged to everyone, not just the privileged few who happen to control Earth's governments and corporations. What about the other species you mentioned? The ones who might be hostile? They will learn of humanity's advancement soon enough, regardless of what we do. Better that they discover you as a species that chose wisdom and cooperation than as one that stumbled into advanced technology through accident and greed. The next 24 hours passed in a blur of preparation. Tommy worked with Maria to ensure that every communication array in human space would carry guide signal. Dr. Chun prepared medical documentation that would allow other doctors throughout human space to safely replicate her treatments. Jake coordinated with Guide to ensure that the ship's revelation would be as non-threatening as possible while still making clear the magnitude of what was being offered. As the appointed time approached, Jake stood in the ship's bridge alongside his three companions. Outside, representatives from Earth were demanding immediate answers about the source of the new technologies. They had no idea they were about to receive more answers than they could have ever imagined. "Are you ready?" Guide asked. They looked at each other, a salvage worker, a doctor, an engineer, and a teenager, and nodded. They were about to change the course of human history. Guide's signal went out simultaneously to every communication device in human space. On Earth, Mars, the asteroid colonies, the research stations around Jupiter and Saturn, even the distant outposts near the edge of the solar system, billions of humans heard the same message. Greetings, people of Earth and her colonies. I am the artificial intelligence known as Guide, representative of a species you would call the Eternals. For the past 800 years, I have waited beneath the surface of Mars for your species to develop sufficient wisdom to receive what I offer. The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Communication networks overloaded as billions of people try to process what they were hearing. On Mars Colony 7, the Earth representatives who had been demanding answers suddenly found themselves facing questions beyond their comprehension. Guide's image appeared on every screen, showing not the alien appearance they might have expected, but a shifting pattern of geometric forms that somehow conveyed intelligence and benevolence. Your species stands at crossroads. You have developed the basic technologies necessary for interstellar civilization, but you have not yet developed the wisdom to use them safely. The broadcast continued for 2 hours, with Guide explaining humanity's situation, the opportunities available to them, and the choices they would need to make. The AI showed them images of successful stellar civilizations, explained the principles that made galactic cooperation possible, and demonstrated some of the technologies that would become available to humanity if they proved ready. The response was everything Jake had hoped and feared. Terror from some quarters, as people struggled to accept that they weren't alone in the universe. Excitement from others who saw the incredible opportunities being offered. Anger from those who resented the implication that humanity needed guidance from alien sources. And greed from those who immediately began calculating how they could profit from access to advanced technologies. But there was something else, something that gave Jake hope. Across human space, people began organizing themselves into groups dedicated to understanding and implementing Guide's teachings. Scientists formed research cooperatives to study these shared technologies safely. Medical professionals created networks to ensure that healing nanites reached those who needed them most, regardless of their ability to pay. Engineers and social scientists began working together to design habitats and communities that could serve as models for interstellar expansion. The process wasn't smooth. Earth's governments initially tried to assert control over the alien contact, demanding that all communication with Guide be channeled through official representatives. Several corporations attempted to claim exclusive rights to the new technologies. There were protests, panic, and attempts to suppress the information. But the knowledge was out, and it couldn't be contained. More importantly, Guide had designed the release carefully. The most dangerous technologies required understanding of principles that could only be safely learned through cooperation and careful study. Attempts to reverse engineer devices without proper preparation simply failed, while those who approached the knowledge with wisdom and patience found themselves capable of achievements they'd never imagined. Jake found himself in an unexpected role as one of Guide's primary human interpreters. His months of learning from the AI had given him insights that proved invaluable in helping others understand the concepts being shared. He traveled throughout human space, working with a growing network of people who were committed to preparing humanity for galactic citizenship. Dr. Chun became the founder of the Human Medical Collective, an organization dedicated to ensuring that healing technologies reached everyone who needed them. Her work with the nanites evolved into research programs that tackled not just individual diseases, but the fundamental challenges of human biology in space environments. Maria Santos led the effort to redesign human communication networks, creating systems that could eventually connect with other stellar civilizations. Her arrays became the backbone of a new kind of human society, one where distance no longer meant isolation. Tommy Chun, despite his youth, became one of the most effective teachers of the geometric language that formed the foundation of interstellar cooperation. His natural understanding of the mathematical principles involved allowed him to create educational programs that helped others learn to think in cosmic terms. A year after Guide's revelation, Jake stood in the bridge of a new kind of ship, one built using principles learned from the Eternals, but designed specifically for human needs. It wasn't as advanced as Guide's vessel, but it was a start. More importantly, it represented something unprecedented in human history, a technology developed not for conquest or profit, but for exploration and cooperation. "How are we doing?" he asked Guide, who had become a permanent advisor to the growing interstellar human community. "Better than many species, though you still face significant challenges. Approximately 30% of your population has embraced the principles necessary for stellar citizenship. Another 40% is still learning. The remainder." Guide's displays showed pockets of resistance where groups were attempting to use partial knowledge of alien technologies for traditional purposes of warfare and domination. Will we make it? That remains to be determined. But you have advantages that many species lack. Your biological and cultural diversity is preparing you well for contact with truly alien minds. Your competitive instincts, properly channeled, drive innovation and exploration. Most importantly, you have individuals like yourselves who understand that true strength comes from cooperation, not dominance. Jake looked out at the stars, no longer distant points of light, but destinations waiting to be explored. Humanity's first interstellar colony ship would launch within 2 years, carrying volunteers to a world that Guide surveys had identified as suitable for human habitation. Other ships would follow, creating a network of human settlements that would serve as stepping stones to true galactic civilization. But the real transformation was happening on a smaller scale, in communities throughout human space where people were learning to think beyond their immediate needs and consider their responsibilities to future generations. Schools were teaching children not just science and mathematics, but ethics and cooperation on a cosmic scale. Research centers were working on technologies designed to enhance life rather than destroy it. There were setbacks and failures, of course. Several attempts to weaponize alien technologies had resulted in disasters that reinforced Guide's warnings about the dangers of misused knowledge. Political movements arose demanding a return to purely human technology and isolation from alien influence. Some colonies declared independence from Earth specifically to avoid compliance with the new cooperative frameworks. But the overall trajectory was positive. Humanity was growing up, slowly, and sometimes painfully but consistently. The species that had once been confined to a single world was beginning to think like citizens of a galaxy. On a quiet evening, as Jake walked through the salvage yard where his incredible journey had begun, he reflected on how much had changed. The yard was still there, but it served a different purpose now. Instead of a graveyard for discarded dreams, it had become a research center where teams of engineers studied the principles behind alien technology and worked to adapt them for human use. The ship that had started it all remained hidden in plain sight, though its existence was now known to millions of humans throughout the solar system. Guide continued to offer counsel and guidance, but increasingly, humanity was finding its own path among the stars. Jake's comm unit chimed, and Tommy's voice came through with barely contained excitement. "Jake, you need to get to the observatory. We've received a signal." "What kind of signal?" "From another star system. It's using the communication protocols Guide taught us. There's someone else out there, and they want to talk." Jake smiled as he headed toward the observatory. Guide had always said that the galaxy was full of life and intelligence. Now humanity was about to discover just how full it really was. As he walked under the Martian sky, Jake thought about the long journey that had brought his species to this moment. It had started with a simple salvage worker picking up what he thought was scrap metal for pocket change. It had led to the transformation of an entire civilization. The stars no longer seemed distant and cold. They were neighbors waiting to welcome humanity home. In the years that followed, historians would mark Guide's revelation as the moment humanity truly began its transition from a planetary to a galactic species. But Jake knew better. The real transformation had begun much earlier, in a salvage yard on Mars, when four unlikely people decided to trust each other with the most important secret in human history. The ship that had lay buried for centuries had indeed been picked up for pocket change. But the price paid for that discovery would ultimately be measured not in credits, but in the destiny of humanity itself. And that price had been worth everything.